The CEO's son once stood in that boardroom and called me worthless in front of 10 colleagues, his voice dripping with the contempt of someone who'd never worked a real day in his life. 1 year later, he was trembling at my apartment door, placing a $200,000 check on my kitchen table, begging for something I no longer needed, the secret that could destroy his entire family. My name is Claire Hastings, and I've spent the last 14 years clawing my way up from nothing. At 32, I'd finally made it to a decent position in product development at Virexon Systems, a mid-tier tech company nestled in the shadow of the Rockies in Denver. No trust fund, no family connections, no safety net, just me and whatever I could build with my own hands since I aged out of foster care at 18. Virexon's glass tower on 17th Street looked impressive from the outside, all gleaming windows and modern architecture. Inside, it was a different story. The company culture reeked of old money and nepotism, where your last name mattered more than your last performance review. The executive floor might as well have been a different planet, populated by men in $5,000 suits who'd never eaten ramen for dinner 3 nights straight just to make rent. The divide between management and workers wasn't just about money, it was a chasm of contempt. They looked at us like we were replaceable cogs, interchangeable parts in their wealth generation machine. And nowhere was this more apparent than in the presence of Bradley Sinclair, the CEO's son. Brad, because of course he went by Brad, had been working at Virexon for 2 years. At 28, he'd been handed a senior vice president title that most of us would need 2 decades to earn. His office was bigger than my entire apartment, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the mountains. He strutted through the halls in his designer suits, always smelling of expensive cologne and entitlement. The thing about Brad wasn't just that he was incompetent. Plenty of executives are. It was the way he wore his incompetence like armor, knowing that his last name made him untouchable. He had this particular smile, this slight curl of his lip when he looked at female employees, like we were amusing pets who'd somehow learned to use computers. In team meetings, he'd interrupt our presentations to explain our own ideas back to us, usually incorrectly. He'd take credit for successful projects he'd never touched and distance himself from failures he'd directly caused. But what made him truly insufferable was how he seemed to take personal pleasure in reminding us of our place. "You have to understand your lane," he'd said to me once when I'd suggested a modification to one of his strategies. "Some people are meant to follow orders, not give them." The worst part? Everyone knew. The other executives saw his incompetence. The board members whispered about his failures. But Robert Sinclair, CEO and proud father, remained blind to it all. Or maybe he just didn't care. Legacy was legacy. And in his world, blood trumped talent every time. I'd worked 70-hour weeks, sacrificed relationships, missed birthdays and holidays, all to prove that someone like me could make it in their world. I'd foolishly believed that merit still meant something, that if you worked hard enough and smart enough, eventually they'd have to recognize your worth. How naive I'd been. In Brad's world, in their world, people like me weren't meant to rise. We were meant to serve, to generate ideas they could claim, to fix problems they created, to smile and nod while they played businessman with daddy's money. But I was good at my job. Damn good. And that, as it would turn out, would be Brad Sinclair's biggest mistake, underestimating just how much damage someone worthless could do when they finally decided to stop playing by the rules. That Tuesday morning in March started like any other. I'd arrived at 6:30 a.m. to prepare for the quarterly product strategy meeting, my laptop bag heavy with research I'd compiled over the past 3 months. The presentation represented everything I'd learned about our users' pain points, market gaps, and a revolutionary approach to data synchronization that could put Virexon ahead of our competitors. The conference room on the 14th floor was already half full when I entered. The usual suspects were there: department heads, senior developers, a few VPs, and of course, Brad, lounging in his chair like he owned the place, which, technically, he would someday. I set up my presentation, my hands steady despite the churning in my stomach. This was my shot. The algorithm I'd developed could change everything for Virexon, and I'd tested it exhaustively. The numbers didn't lie. So, I began, clicking to my first slide. Our current synchronization protocol loses 23% efficiency when handling multiple data streams. I've developed a solution that not only eliminates this loss, but actually improves performance by 41%. For 10 minutes, I had them. Even the executives were leaning forward, studying the graphs, nodding at the logic. I could feel the room's energy shifting, that electric moment when people realize they're seeing something special. Then Brad laughed. It wasn't a subtle sound. It was loud, performative, designed to shatter the moment like a brick through glass. Everyone turned to look at him. "I'm sorry," he said, not looking sorry at all. "But this is just adorable." "Really?" My mouth went dry. "I'm not sure what you mean." He stood up, walking around the table with that predator's smile. "Claire, right? From the little cubicle farm downstairs." He turned to address the room. "This is exactly the kind of half-baked, amateur hour thinking that's holding Virexon back. The data clearly shows," I started. "The data shows nothing," he interrupted, his voice rising. "Because you don't understand data. You don't understand business. You don't understand your place in this company." He picked up my printed proposal and flipped through it mockingly. "This is worthless. Just like—" He paused, seeming to savor the moment, making sure everyone was watching. "Just like you." The words hung in the air like poison. Someone gasped. A few people shifted uncomfortably in their seats. But nobody spoke up. Nobody defended me. Brad tossed my proposal back on the table, pages scattering. "Maybe you should focus on something more your speed. I hear Walmart's hiring. Or Target. Somewhere that sells things in bulk. Just like these bulk rate ideas of yours." A few nervous chuckles rippled through the room. Gerald from finance, Patricia from operations, even Linda, who I'd thought was a friend, cracked a smile. "Mr. Sinclair," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. "I've worked on this for months. If you just look at the test results—" "The only result I see," he said, returning to his seat with theatrical satisfaction, "is another waste of company time. Meeting adjourned. Everyone but Claire can go." They filed out quickly, avoiding eye contact. Cowards, every one of them. When the door closed, Brad leaned back in his chair, studying me like I was something he'd stepped in. "You know what your problem is?" he asked. "You think coding makes you special. You think because you can make computers talk to each other, you belong at this table. But you don't. You're support staff. A technician. Nothing more." I stood there, my presentation scattered across the table, my career potentially in ruins, and something inside me broke. Not in the way that makes you cry or scream. It broke in the way that makes you go very, very quiet. "I understand," I said finally. Brad smirked. "Good. Clean this up before you go." He left me there with my scattered papers and shattered dignity. I gathered each page slowly, methodically, memorizing every diagram, every line of code, every innovation he'd just dismissed. That night, I lay in my studio apartment, staring at the water stain on my ceiling, replaying every word. Worthless. Amateur. Nothing more. By morning, something had crystallized in my mind. They wanted me to know my place? Fine. I'd learn my place, and then I'd use it to destroy everything they'd built. I gave Virexon 3 more months of my life. 3 months of perfect attendance, flawless reports, and absolutely no waves. I became invisible, which was exactly what I needed to be. While Brad strutted through the halls believing he'd put me in my place, I was quietly documenting every piece of my algorithm, every innovation I developed on company time that they'd rejected. The resignation letter was brief and professional. 2 weeks' notice, effective immediately. HR barely looked up when I submitted it. "Another opportunity?" Harriet from Human Resources asked, her fingers already dancing across the keyboard to process my exit. "Something like that," I said. "No exit interview. No questions about why a senior developer was leaving, just another replaceable cog removing itself from the machine." Brad probably didn't even notice I was gone. My savings account held $23,000. Every penny I'd scraped together over 5 years of rice dinners and thrift store clothes. In the tech world, that wasn't enough to launch anything. But I didn't need the tech world. I needed 3 people who believed in the algorithm Brad had called worthless. I found them in unexpected places. Marcus, a back-end developer from my previous job who'd been laid off in budget cuts. Sarah, a UI designer working freelance after her startup folded. And Dimitri, a systems architect I'd met at a conference who was tired of building other people's dreams. We met in my apartment, the 4 of us crowded around my kitchen table covered in laptops and legal pads. I showed them everything: the synchronization protocol, the efficiency gains, the potential applications. Their eyes lit up the way mine had months ago. "This is incredible," Marcus said, running the calculations for the 3rd time. "How did Virexon not jump on this?" "Politics," I said simply. "But their loss is our opportunity." We incorporated as EchoGlint Technologies, using a Delaware C Corp structure that kept our names off the public records. I legally changed my business name to C. Morgan, close enough to my real name to feel authentic, different enough to stay off Virexon's radar. We operated like ghosts. No social media presence, no press releases, no conference appearances. The first 6 months were brutal. We worked out of Sarah's garage, coding 18-hour days, living on instant noodles and determination. The algorithm that had been dismissed as amateur hour became the foundation of something revolutionary. We didn't just implement my original idea, we expanded it, refined it, made it sing. Our first client came through Dimitri's network, a small logistics company desperate for better data handling. They became our test case, our proof of concept. Within weeks, their efficiency jumped 38%. Word spread quietly through back channels, the way the best secrets do in Silicon Valley. By month 8, we had 12 clients. By month 10, 30. We stayed small, stayed quiet, stayed hungry. Every dollar went back into development. We turned down venture capital, refused acquisition offers, ignored the recruiters who somehow found our unlisted number. I watched Virexon's quarterly reports with interest. Their market share was slipping, their innovation pipeline drying up. Brad had been promoted to Executive Vice President of Strategy, because of course he had. His LinkedIn posts about disrupting the disruption were particularly amusing. The beautiful irony was that we weren't trying to compete with Virexon. At first, we were just building the best product we could with the ideas they'd thrown away. But the market has a way of recognizing value, even when it comes from unexpected places. Our clients started including enterprise names. Companies that had been Virexon customers for years quietly began testing our platform. They didn't make announcements, didn't issue press releases, they just switched, one by one, drawn by the superior performance of an algorithm once declared worthless. I remember the night Sarah showed me the user analytics. We'd crossed 100,000 active users without a single advertising dollar spent. Pure word of mouth, pure performance. "You know what this means?" she asked, grinning. I knew exactly what it meant. We weren't just surviving, we were winning. And somewhere in his corner office, Brad Sinclair was about to learn what happened when you confuse silence with surrender. The best part? He still had no idea I existed. To him, I was just another forgotten face from a meeting he'd probably forgotten. Another nobody he'd stepped on while climbing his inherited ladder. But in the shadows of the tech world, EchoGlint was becoming a whispered legend. The phantom competitor. The ghost in the machine. The disruption that nobody saw coming until it was too late to stop. The panic at Virexon started with whispers in November. I heard about it through Marcus, who still had friends on the inside. Apparently, their biggest client, a Fortune 500 financial services firm, had quietly declined to renew their annual contract. Then another, then 3 more in a single week. They're hemorrhaging customers, Marcus told me over coffee in our cramped office. My buddy in sales says the executives are losing their minds trying to figure out what's happening. What was happening was EchoGlint. We'd never targeted Virexon's clients directly. We didn't have to. When you build a better mousetrap, The mice find you. Our synchronization protocol didn't just outperform Virexon's legacy system, it made it look prehistoric. The emergency board meeting happened on a Thursday. I know because Dimitri's former colleague live texted him the drama. Robert Sinclair, the CEO himself, demanded answers. Who was this mysterious competitor? Where had they come from? How had nobody seen this coming? The investigation that followed was almost comical in its desperation. Virexon hired consultants, deployed corporate spies, and analyzed every former employee who'd left in the past 2 years. They were looking for the obvious suspects: fired executives, disgruntled senior managers, maybe a rival company's secret project. They never thought to look at the nobody from the cubicle farm downstairs. Brad, as executive vice president of strategy, was tasked with leading the investigation. The irony was delicious. He assembled a war room on the executive floor, complete with whiteboards covered in string theory-style connections between former employees and potential competitors. Someone leaked our development pipeline, he declared in one meeting, according to my sources. This Echo Glint knows exactly where we're weak. Wrong. Brad. Echo Glint knew where you were weak because you'd announced it to a room full of people. You tossed the solution in the trash and called it worthless. The paranoia infected the entire company. Trust evaporated. Employees were subjected to increased monitoring. Email surveillance went up. Several developers were accused of corporate espionage and escorted out by security. The toxic culture I'd escaped became a pressure cooker of suspicion. Meanwhile, we kept building. Our series of shell companies and legal structures kept our identities hidden. See, Morgan was just a name on incorporation documents. The tech press was going crazy trying to unmask the founders of EchoGlint, but we gave them nothing. No interviews, no photos, no origin story. The breakthrough in Virexon's investigation came from an unexpected source. Someone in HR, doing a routine audit, noticed that several of Virexon's lost clients had one thing in common. They'd all attended a small, invitation-only demo 6 months earlier. A demo for a revolutionary synchronization protocol that improved efficiency by exactly 41%. The same number I'd presented in that conference room. Suddenly, the investigation shifted focus. Brad pulled the meeting records from that Tuesday in March. He saw my name on the attendee list. He remembered Claire Hastings. He reportedly said in the war room, the name like ash in his mouth, the nobody with the amateur hour presentation. They pulled my personnel file, reviewed my exit date, checked my LinkedIn, which still showed me as seeking opportunities. They found nothing connecting me to EchoGlint because I'd been meticulous. But Brad knew. In his gut, he knew. The forensic accounting team they hired found more patterns. The efficiency gains EchoGlint promised matched my projections exactly. The architecture resembled patents I'd filed while at Virexon, patents they'd never bothered to develop. The timing lined up too perfectly to be coincidence. But knowing and proving are different things. They had no evidence of theft because I hadn't stolen anything. I'd taken my own ideas, the ones they'd rejected, and built something better. Nothing illegal about that. Nothing actionable. The December board meeting was brutal. Robert Sinclair demanded his son explain how a nobody had potentially developed the technology that was now eating their market share. How had Brad missed this? How had he been so spectacularly wrong? For the first time in his life, Brad Sinclair faced consequences. Not termination. Nepotism ran too deep for that. But his portfolio was stripped, his authority curtailed, the golden boy was tarnished, and everyone knew it. The beautiful thing about revenge is that sometimes you don't have to do anything. Sometimes you just have to build something better and let their own arrogance do the rest. By January, Virexon's stock had dropped 30%. EchoGlint was valued at $200 million in private markets. And somewhere in Denver, Brad Sinclair was learning what it felt like to be considered worthless by the only person whose opinion he cared about, his father. But he wasn't done. Desperate men do desperate things. And Brad Sinclair was about to prove just how far he'd fall when his privileged world came crashing down. The knock came at 9:47 p.m. on a Wednesday in February. I I remember the exact time because I was debugging a particularly stubborn piece of code, and the interruption made me lose my train of thought. My apartment building didn't have a doorman, and I wasn't expecting anyone. Through the peephole, I saw a face I'd never expected to see again. Certainly not here. In my shabby hallway with its flickering fluorescent lights and water-stained ceiling. Bradley Sinclair looked like hell. Gone was the perfect hair, the designer suit, the predator's confidence. He stood in my hallway wearing a wrinkled button-down and jeans that had seen better days. His eyes were bloodshot, darting nervously like a cornered animal. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. Brad. Claire. His voice cracked on my name. Can we talk? I don't think we have anything to talk about. Please. The words seemed to physically hurt him. Brad Sinclair had probably never said please in his entire life. 5 minutes. That's all I need. I let him stew for a moment, enjoying the reversal. Then I stepped aside. He entered my 600-square-foot studio like he was walking into a war zone, taking in the second-hand furniture, the laptop set up on my kitchen table, the view of the parking lot. So this is where you live, he said. And for a moment, I heard the old Brad, the sneer trying to resurface. But it died quickly. He didn't have the power for contempt anymore. What do you want? He reached into his jacket and pulled out a leather portfolio. From it, he extracted a check. Even in the dim light of my apartment, I could see the amount. $200,000. This is yours if you stop, he said, placing it on my kitchen table with shaking hands. All of it, free and clear, no taxes, no strings, just stop. I didn't touch the check. Stop what? Don't play dumb, Claire, Echo Glint, your little revenge project. I know it's you. I have no idea what you're talking about. Stop lying. He slammed his hand on the table, then seemed to deflate. Sorry, I'm sorry. It's just... Do you have any idea what you've done? My father barely looks at me. The board wants me gone. They're talking about bringing in outside leadership, breaking the family control that's existed for 40 years. That sounds like a Virexon problem, not a me problem. He laughed bitterly. Right. Of course. You planned this perfectly, didn't you? Used shell companies, hidden ownership, the whole thing. We can't prove anything. Our lawyers say we have no case. Then why are you here? Because I'm desperate. The admission hung between us like a confession. Because I've lost everything that matters, my position, my father's respect, my future. Because of you. Because of some algorithm I didn't even look at properly. You called it worthless, I reminded him. You called me worthless. He flinched. I know. I remember. Every word. He sank into my one kitchen chair without invitation. I've had a lot of time to think about that meeting, about all the meetings, about how I've treated people like you. People like me. People who actually know how to do things, who create value instead of just existing on top of it. He looked up at me with haunted eyes. I'm 30 years old, and I've never actually built anything, never created anything. I just performed, played the role of executive while people like you did the real work. It was strange, seeing him like this, broken, almost human. The check, he continued, gesturing weakly at the table. It's everything I have liquid. My trust fund doesn't unlock for another 5 years, but I can get more. Loans, selling my car, whatever you want. Just give me something. A licensing deal. A partnership. Hell, let Virexin buy in as a minority investor. Anything that lets me go back to my father with something other than total failure. You want me to save you? I want you to show mercy. He stood up, attempting to salvage some dignity. You've won, Claire. You've destroyed me more thoroughly than I ever hurt you. I'm begging you. What's it going to take? I picked up the check, studied it. $200,000. More money than I'd ever seen in one place. Enough to expand Echo Glint faster, hire more developers, maybe even get a real office. But that wasn't what this was about. It had never been about money. "I'll tell you what," I said, setting the check back down. "I'll consider your offer. But first, I need something from you." Hope flickered in his eyes. "Anything." "A written statement, detailing that meeting in March. What you said, how you treated me, how you've treated every nobody who's ever worked under you. Send it to the entire board of directors and CC all of Virexon's employees." The hope died. "That would be corporate suicide. Then I guess we're done here." "Claire, please. You have 10 seconds to take your check and leave." He stared at me, perhaps finally understanding that some things couldn't be bought, bullied, or inherited. Then he picked up the check with trembling fingers and walked to the door. "For what it's worth," he said, pausing at the threshold. "You were never worthless. The algorithm was brilliant. You were brilliant. I was just too stupid and arrogant to see it." "I know," I said, and closed the door in his face. 3 days later, my phone buzzed with a Google alert. Brad Sinclair had actually done it. The email went out at 3 a.m., probably after hours of agonizing and liquid courage. It was addressed to Virexon's board of directors, with every employee in the company CC'd. The subject line was simple: "A necessary confession." Marcus forwarded it to me within minutes. "Holy shit, Claire. You need to see this." Brad's statement was more thorough than I'd expected. He detailed not just our March meeting, but a pattern of behavior going back years. The women he'd belittled, the ideas he'd stolen, the careers he'd derailed with casual cruelty. He named names, cited specific incidents, acknowledged the toxic culture he'd helped create and perpetuate. About me, he wrote, "I dismissed Claire Hastings's revolutionary algorithm as worthless without examination, purely because I saw her as beneath consideration. This wasn't a business decision, it was prejudice, arrogance, and stupidity. The technology now powering our competitors' success was in our hands, and I threw it away because I couldn't see past my own privilege. The corporate world loves a scandal, but it loves a self-immolation even more." By 9 a.m., the email had leaked to TechCrunch. By noon, it was trending on Twitter. "Worthless Gate," they called it. The board meeting that afternoon was swift and merciless. Brad Sinclair was terminated effective immediately. No golden parachute, no graceful exit. Robert Sinclair abstained from the vote, the ultimate abandonment from a father who'd protected him all his life. But the damage went deeper than one executive's fall. The confession had named other incidents, other victims. A class action lawsuit materialized within days. Investors started asking hard questions about corporate governance. The SEC announced an investigation into potential securities fraud related to undisclosed internal issues. Virexon's stock price went into free fall. Sarah found me in our office that evening, staring at my monitor without really seeing it. "You okay?" "I didn't want this," I said quietly. "The lawsuits, the investigations, other people getting hurt. Brad did this, not you. You just asked him to tell the truth. I knew what would happen. And he knew what he'd done." She sat on the edge of my desk. "You gave him a choice. He could have walked away with his secrets intact. He chose confession. Maybe he had. Or maybe I'd known that a man like Brad, desperate and cornered, would do anything for even the possibility of redemption. Maybe I'd counted on it." The next morning, a handwritten note appeared under my apartment door. Brad's handwriting was as broken as he'd looked. "You were right. It was never about the money. It was about acknowledgement, about consequences. I've lost everything. But for the first time in my life, I actually did the right thing. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I finally understand. Some things can't be bought back. Some mistakes can't be undone. Some people like you, can't be dismissed. B." I burned the note in my kitchen sink, watching his words turn to ash. Within a month, Virexon had lost 60% of its market value. Robert Sinclair stepped down as CEO, ending 4 decades of family control. The company brought in a crisis management team, but the exodus had begun. Their best developers jumped ship. Their remaining clients nervously explored alternatives. Meanwhile, EchoGlint announced our Series A funding, $50 million at a $500 million valuation. We made no mention of Virexon, no victory laps, no press releases about defeating a competitor. We just kept building. The tech press went wild trying to connect the dots. They knew someone at EchoGlint had to be connected to the Virexon collapse. They dug into C. Morgan, tried to trace the shell companies, offered rewards for information. But my partners held firm. We'd built something together, and we protected it. Brad Sinclair disappeared from public view. Someone told me he'd taken a job at a nonprofit, teaching coding to underserved kids. Building something real for the first time in his life. I hoped it was true. Virexon eventually stabilized under new leadership, but as a shadow of its former self, they became a cautionary tale in business schools. How arrogance and nepotism could destroy decades of success in months. And somewhere in Denver, in a small office above a Thai restaurant, 4 people who'd been told they were nobodies continued to build something extraordinary. The revenge wasn't in their destruction, it was in our success. It was in proving that the worthless algorithm could reshape an industry. It was in showing that talent, determination, and genuine innovation would always triumph over privilege and politics. It was in never needing their validation again. 5 years have passed since Brad Sinclair stood in my doorway with that check. EchoGlint is valued at $2.8 billion now, though you won't find my real name on any of the corporate documents. C. Morgan remains a ghost, a cipher. Exactly as I prefer it. We never went public. Never sold out to the tech giants who came calling with their 10-figure offers. We built something sustainable, something real, something that couldn't be dismissed or destroyed by someone's privileged son having a bad day. I still live modestly, a better apartment. Sure, but nothing flashy. My old Honda finally died. So I bought a Tesla, but a used one. The money was never the point. It was always about proving value, about showing that the worthless ideas from nobodies could reshape entire industries. Sometimes I walk past Virexon's old building. They sold it last year, couldn't afford the lease anymore. A co-working space operates there now, full of hungry young developers with their own revolutionary ideas. I wonder how many Bradley Sinclairs are out there right now, dismissing the next world-changing innovation because it came from the wrong person. Marcus runs our European operations now. Sarah heads design for our entire product suite. Dimitri architected a system that processes more data daily than Virexon ever dreamed of handling. We all got rich. But more importantly, we all got to build something that mattered. Brad? I looked him up once, curiosity getting the better of me. He's still at that nonprofit, teaching kids from backgrounds like mine how to code. His LinkedIn shows none of his former corporate glory, just photos of beaming teenagers holding their first programming certificates. Maybe destruction can lead to construction. Maybe some people can change. His father died 2 years ago. Heart attack in a boardroom, still trying to salvage something from Virexon's remains. Brad didn't inherit anything. Robert had rewritten his will after the scandal. Everything went to charity. A final disinheritance from beyond the grave. People sometimes ask me if I regret it. If I feel guilty about the careers disrupted, the wealth destroyed, the dynasty ended. The truth is complicated. I regret that it had to happen. I don't regret that it did. Because here's what I learned in that conference room when Brad called me worthless. The powerful only understand power. They only respect force. You can't shame them into better behavior or appeal to their non-existent consciences. You can only show them, in terms they understand, that their actions have consequences. I didn't need his $200,000. I needed him to understand that some things can't be bought, some people can't be dismissed, and some wounds create warriors instead of victims. The last email I ever sent from my personal account was to Brad, the day our valuation crossed $1 billion. Just one line. Still think it's worthless? He never replied. He didn't need to. Every quarter, EchoGlint donates to programs that help underestimated people in tech. We fund scholarships, sponsor boot camps, mentor developers who don't have the right pedigree or connections. We actively look for the dismissed ideas, the overlooked talent, the nobodies who might be carrying the next revolution in their laptops. Because that's the real revenge, not just succeeding despite them, but creating a world where the next Claire Hastings doesn't have to destroy anything to be heard, where merit actually matters, where worthless is a word reserved for ideas that truly lack value, not people who lack privilege. My office, yes, I finally have an office, overlooks the mountains. Sometimes, when the light hits just right, I can see the glass tower where it all started, where a frightened woman gathered scattered papers while a privileged man laughed at her dreams. I don't feel triumphant when I see it. I don't feel vindicated. I just feel finished. The story that started in that conference room has reached its conclusion, not with Brad's destruction, but with my own construction. They called me worthless. I built an empire. They dismissed my work. It revolutionized an industry. They thought I was nobody. I proved that nobody is nobody. And that $200,000 check? I kept it. Never cashed it, just framed it and hung it in our office bathroom. A reminder that some people will try to put a price on dignity, but dignity is the one thing that's truly priceless. Every morning, our team walks past it on their way to build the future. Most don't know the story. They just see an uncashed check and wonder. But I know. And Brad knows. And in the end, that's all the revenge I ever really needed. The worthless girl won. And she didn't need anyone's permission to do it. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Drop a comment below and let's connect. If this story resonated with you, please consider subscribing to the channel and sharing your own thoughts. Have you ever been underestimated? How did you prove them wrong? I read every comment and would love to hear your experiences.